For tonight's homework, I'm going to have you do these problems on paper, and then I'm going to have you do them in your composition notebook as well, and then write a sentence about each. Know that I do like you to make a slide about the distance formula to add to your class Google slide file that you have for me. So make sure you do that too, and then make sure you know that this Friday is progress report halfway through the third quarter. So here we go. Find the distance of 2 points using the distance formula. So for this first problem, the 2 points I'm going to use are -5, 4, and the other point is 1, 2. So make sure you're using the correct coordinates, writing them down correctly. Coordinates are always x, y, so I'm going to label those x and y. That first coordinate is up there, that's -5, 5, and then that bottom one is 1, -2. That's where I got those points. Distance formula always has you subtract the 2 x numbers and then the 2 y numbers. So what I'm doing here, I'm subtracting -5 and this 1. Those are both x's, and I'm adding that to the difference of the y numbers, 5 minus, but this is already negative, so that is -2. So be careful when you're doing this formula. -5 minus 1, I subtracted these 2 x's. There was no double negative subtracting in this direction. So -5 minus 1, I write it just like that. But when I go 5 minus a value that's negative already, that's 5 minus -2. That's why I write that as a double negative. 5 subtracting -2 is the same as 5 plus 2. So here we go. 5 minus 1 gives me -6 squared. And then that will give me +36. 5 plus 2, because again that turns the plus in there, 5 plus 2, that gives me 7 squared. So now when I do the exponent, -6 times -6 is 36. 7 times 7 is 49. Add those up. 36 plus 49 gives me 85. And that is not simplifiable. There is not a perfect root in that. Alright, next problem. The points are 0, 3 and -2, 4. Does not matter how I write the coordinates. I could have wrote -2, 4 first and 0, 3 second. For this problem, I'm going to have you connect the x's and connect the y's. I'm going to have you label the x and y. Best thing you could do for this is to connect them, so you make sure you're subtracting these x numbers from each of the coordinates together in this formula, and you're subtracting the y coordinates from each of these points together. So here I go. Pair them up, label them. I'm going to subtract in the same consistent direction. I'm going to subtract left to right just like I would an order of operation problem and stay consistent. I'm going to subtract 0 minus a -2, and on the bottom I'm going to go 3 minus 4 for the y's. So 0 minus something that's already negative, 0 taken away -2, will be 0 plus 2 when that double sign changes. 3 minus 4, there's no double negatives there, so that's just plain old 3 minus 4. 0 minus -2 gives me 0 plus 2, which will give me 2 squared. 3 minus 4 just gives me -1 squared. That gives me 2 squared plus -1 squared, which is 1. So I get 4 plus 1. Remember, -1 times -1 is 1. Gives me the square root of 5, which is not simplifiable. Alright, next problem, number 2. The 2 points are -5, 1, which is this point right here, -5 for x, 1 for y, and the other point is 4, 0. I'm going to label x and y for each point. I'm going to pair up my x's. I'm going to pair up my y's. I'm going to subtract the same direction, left to right for both. I'm going to make sure I plug these x numbers in together and these y numbers in together. So that gives me -5 minus 4 squared plus 1 minus 0 squared. Gives me -5 minus 4, which is -9 squared, plus 1 squared. That gives me negative 9 times negative 9 is positive 81 plus 1. And that gives me the square root of 82. And I believe that cannot be simplified. All right, next problem, number 4. Excuse me as I try to make these smaller so you can see. I'm going to shrink this up. Feel free to pause and restart the video whenever you need to get to the problem that you'd like some help on. Alright, number 4. This problem is kind of unique, kind of what I want you to think about. I could find the length of the segment by counting boxes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is 6 boxes long. If I plug the points in correctly, I should also get 6. If I was to take the high value 2 minus the small value, 2 minus 4 would also give me 6. So I could either count boxes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I could take the high value for x minus the small value, this 2 for y minus 4 for y will give me the length of that in y. Or I could use my points. So my points are going to be negative 4, 2, and the other one is negative 4, negative 4. So again, I could find that length by counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 boxes long along that y-axis. Or I could take the high value minus the small value on the y-axis. 2 minus 4 also gives me 2 plus 4, which is 6. And then a third way, I could use these points. So I could connect my x's, connect my y's. That'll give me negative 4, subtracting a negative 4. That is a double negative. So negative 4 minus something that's already negative turns into a double negative. Negative 4 minus 4 plus 2 and another double negative, subtracting something already negative. So 2 minus negative 4 is 2 minus 4. That turns to plus. That gives me the square root of negative 4 plus 4 squared plus 2 plus 4 squared here. Negative 4 plus negative 4 or plus 4 is 0 squared plus 6 squared. Gives me the square root of 36, which is 6, just like I counted. Alright, next page, or next part. Again, for this straight segment, I could count boxes 1, 2, 3, 4. I could take the high value minus the small. Negative 1 minus 4. Negative 1 minus 5 is negative 1 plus 5, which gives me 4. So I could find the distance 3 ways. Counting 1, 2, 3, 4. Taking the high value minus the small, and I kind of mixed this up. Instead of writing negative 5 minus 1, I really should have wrote the high value, which is negative 1 minus 5, which would have given me negative 1 plus 5, which would have given me positive 4. This gives me a negative value the way I did it, but since there's no negative length, we just pretend that's a positive 4. But I need to be able to do that with the formula. So here we go. This formula, this is x, this is y, x, y. I'm going to label x and y. I'm going to connect my x's and connect my y's. I'm going to subtract left to right. That's going to be the square root of negative 5 minus something already negative, so minus 1 squared, plus negative 4 minus 4 squared, because again you're subtracting something already negative. That gives me negative 5 plus 1 squared plus negative 4 plus 4 squared. That gives me negative 4 to the second power, which is going to be positive 16. Negative 4 plus 4 is 0, so that gives me 16. And the square root of 16 is 4, just like I counted. That is 4 boxes long. All right, next problem. Subtract x's and y's, so negative 2 minus minus 7 plus 3 minus minus 7. So that's going to be negative 2 minus minus 7. I'm going to fix this. So negative 2 minus something already negative, negative 2 minus minus 7 plus, in parentheses, 3 minus minus 7 again, because I'm subtracting a negative value. That gives me, underneath the radical, the square root of negative 2 plus 7 squared plus, in parentheses, 3 minus minus 7 is again plus 7 squared. Negative 2 plus 7 gives me 5 squared plus 10 squared. That gives me 25 plus 100, which is 125. And if I tried to simplify that, that would be 25 times 5, which gives me square root of 25 times 5. When I split it in half, that gives me root 25 times 5, which ends up reducing into 5 root 5. All right, excuse me as I shrink this up to get more room. I'm going to fast forward a little bit here. All right, number 9. 5, 9, negative 7, negative 7. That's going to be 5 minus minus 7, which is 5 plus 7 squared. Plus 9 minus minus 7, again, is 9 plus 7. Whenever you subtract a negative value, that is a double negative, that turns to plus. That gives me 12 squared plus 16 squared. 12 squared is 144. 16 times 16, using my calculator, is 256 added to 144 gives me the square root of 400, I believe. And that is a perfect group. That is 20. 20 times 20 gives me 400. All right, number 10. Excuse me again as I shrink this up. And I'm going to move that down to the bottom left again. Feel free to stop and pause and replay parts of this video that are needed. Alright, next problem I'm going to do is number 8. So I have 2, negative 9, negative 1, 4. Subtracting my x's left to right, that's going to be 2 minus minus 1, which is 2 plus 1 squared, plus negative 9 minus 4, no double negative there because you're subtracting a positive value. That gives me 3 squared plus negative 16 squared. I'm sorry, negative 13 squared, which gives me 9 plus 169, which gives me the square root of 178, and I believe that cannot be simplified. Alright, I'm going to shrink this down. Next problem is, I believe, number 11. Number 11, I got negative 10, negative 7, negative 8, positive 1. I'm going to subtract my x's and subtract my y's together. So negative 10 subtracting a negative 8 is negative 10 plus 8. Again, I'm going to show you everything here. Negative 10 minus something already negative is a double negative. Negative 7 minus 1, no double negative there because I'm not subtracting a negative value. I'm going to show you that I labeled X and Y. I'm going to show you how I knew which numbers to subtract for X and which numbers for Y. Negative 10 minus 8 is negative 10 plus 8 plus negative 7 minus 1 is negative 8 squared. Negative 10 plus 8 is negative 2 squared. Negative 8 squared is negative 8 times negative 8, which is 64. That gives me 4 plus 64, which is the square root of 70. And at this point, I think it cannot be simplified, so I'm going to shrink it. And move on to the last problem, number 10. Or 12. 10, I'm sorry. Two more. So this gives me 8, 5. And negative 1, 3. So real quickly, 8 minus 1 is 8 plus 1 squared plus 5 minus 3 squared. That gives me the square root of 9 squared plus 2 squared. Gives me 81 plus 4, which gives me the square root of 85. And I believe that cannot be simplified. Last problem, number 12. Negative 6, negative 10, and negative 2, negative 10. So negative 6, negative 10, negative 2, negative 10. I'm going to connect my x's and my y's. So negative 6 minus 2 is negative 6 plus 2 squared. Plus negative 10 minus 10 is negative 10 plus 10 squared. Gives me negative 4 squared plus 0 squared. Gives me the square root of 16, because negative 4 times negative 4 is 16, and that simplifies into positive 4. Alright, so do these on paper, do them again in your composition notebook, and write a sentence for each. Know that Friday is the deadline for the progress reports. Know that I'm assigning you to work on a slide for this week, one so far, on distance formula. Good luck.